At the heart of the book of Obadiah is the passage I focused on in my sermon this past Sunday, which has that repeated emphasis, you should not have. And how that's repeated so many times for all the things that the Edomites should not have done to their neighbors, to their brother, the Israelites. And our verse for the day is verse 12. But you should not have gloated over your brother on the day of his misfortune. You should not have rejoiced over the people of Judah on the day of their ruin. You should not have boasted on the day of distress. Again, as I alluded to, the background between the Edomites and the Israelites goes all the way back to the story of Jacob and Esau, which you can find part of the heart of it back in Genesis chapter 25 in verses 19 through 34. And it's there that we hear the story of how when Rebekah conceived, the children struggled within her, and the Lord tells her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger. And so you have this struggle between Jacob and Esau that begins before they're even born, and it will continue throughout their lives. And unfortunately, in kind of an example of how not to raise children, part of what we see is that Rebekah and Isaac clearly each play a favorite. And so Isaac's favorite is Esau, his son, who's the hunter and the outdoorsman and, kind of that strong, hardy guy who goes out and hunts and brings back his father game and food. And you can kind of picture the two of them. And Jacob, if you'll forgive me for saying, is kind of a mama's boy. He never leaves his mom's skirts. He's always close by, doting on his mom. And his mom loves having his attention and having him around. And so, unfortunately, one of the huge mistakes parents can make in parenting is not having a united front as far as their children. And clearly that's a failure of Rebekah and Isaac. And you could say historically, that leads to unbelievable consequences for generations and for hundreds and hundreds of years. So parents, don't make that mistake. Always have a united front with your kids. But the huge mistake that we see in Obadiah with the descendants of Jacob and Esau is, Israel would say, the Edomites' failure to see the Israelites as their brother, as their kin, who needed their support in a critical time. And from a New Testament standpoint, it kind of reminds me of the story of the Good Samaritan, when the lawyer asked Jesus what he must do to inherit eternal life, and Jesus ends up telling the story he does because the lawyer asks, and who is my neighbor? And the point of the Good Samaritan story, which is such a classic, is anybody in need is our neighbor, is our brother and sister. And that's part of what Jesus also says in his image of the great judgment in Matthew 25 in verses 31 to 46. When did we see Jesus hungry, thirsty, naked, in prison? When we saw the least of these. So one of the things we see in Obadiah is the importance of our understanding of who our sister and brother, who our neighbor truly is. And it's not determined by biology, it's not determined by geography, it's determined by our theology. And our theology says our brother and sister and neighbor is anyone in need who needs our help, who we can respond to. Be a good neighbor, just like Mr. Rogers told you when you were a child.